the trial before Pilate. And look at on page 309, verse 4. Pilate said to the chief priests and the multitudes, "I find no crime in this man." Okay, that's the first time. Turn the page, 338. Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people and said, "You brought me this man as one who was perverting the people. After examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him." Okay, that's number 2. And turn the page again, page 312, towards the bottom of the column. "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no crime deserving death. I will therefore chastise him and release him." So you get from Pilate a triple declaration of innocence. This is important because remember, Luke has a bigger agenda than the other gospel writers. He's going to tell the story of the early church's development in the Roman world. And the Romans were suspicious of new religions, new anythings. They were a very traditional people. And so there was tension. And you know, St. Paul lost his head and Peter lost his head. So Luke is going to be playing out the message that the empire has nothing to fear. That even from the beginning, though Jesus died at the hand of Pilate, he was an innocent man. And this idea of Christian innocence is going to continue throughout the Acts of the Apostles. Okay, but it begins here. I want you to go a page back, though. There's to Pericope 337. Jesus before Herod. Only Luke has King Herod of Galilee. Okay, this is not the Herod who tried to destroy Jesus as a child. This is one of his descendants, who is the ruler over Galilee, who came to the city for the holiday, for Passover. And when Pilate, after his first declaration of innocence, hears that Jesus is a Galilean, he says, "Good, I can send him to Herod, let Herod deal with him." This is the famous scene where Jesus does come to Herod. It was earlier in the gospel, Herod wanted to see Jesus. But now that he sees him, he questions him, but Jesus says nothing back. And the chief priests who are there similarly accuse Jesus, but Jesus says nothing. At verse 11, Herod with his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then arraying him in gorgeous apparel, he sent him back to Pilate. Then this verse, and Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day. For before this, they had been at enmity with each other. Because of a theme that's going to appear in the rest of the Passion, I think this is not an accident or just an incidental thing. Pilate and Herod were in tension, but after they meet Jesus, they become friends. Jesus is the agent of reconciliation. Now, I grant you that it may sound a little weak here. Neither Pilate nor Herod are figures to imitate. But it leaps out at me that Luke bothered to say that they got along now, though they hadn't in the past. Jesus is this ball of power and energy that cannot help but to bring reconciliation. Okay? Jesus is not scourged in Luke's gospel. I'm not sure what significance that is meant. Is it meant to make the Romans not look quite so bad? But in Luke's telling, there's no mention of it. Pericope 342. The soldiers mock Jesus, and that whole episode is not repeated in Luke. So again, not that Rome is shown as being protective of Jesus, but just that some of the brutal aspects of Mark's version are not given. 343. Turn the page. On the way to Golgotha, Jesus encounters various groups. And with each of the groups, he is in charge. He's not a bloody mess. He's not just can't hardly handle himself. He is issuing forgiveness and encouragement left and right. Begins with verse 27. There followed him a great multitude of people and of women. Women, notice again the emphasis on women, who bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning to them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. Behold, the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore and the breast that never gave suck. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry? This shows Jesus comforting the women. And the references to the days to come are references likely to the Roman destruction of Jerusalem. Okay? That's how it seems to me, anyway. You could suggest he's talked about the end of time, but I remember Jesus wept when he came into Jerusalem because he saw what was coming. And as the women here are comforting him, he tries to comfort them and tell them that, you know, if you're falling apart now, I'm sorry, because it's going to be much worse in a little while. 343. Jesus is crucified, and in verse 34, he says, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Again, look at the other columns. That's uniquely Lucan. Okay? Turn the page. Philippians 3:45. The people stood by watching, but the rulers scoffed at him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself if he is the Christ of God, his chosen one. The soldiers also mock. So the soldiers and the officials scoff and mock, but the people just watch. Okay? A somewhat more less condemnatory view of the people of Jerusalem. Pericope 346 is the story of the two thieves. Now, the two people who are crucified with Jesus appear both in Matthew and Mark, but only in Luke is there this conversation. The one of them mocks, Are you not the Christ? Save yourself. There's an emphasis on saving. Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? We indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds. This man has done nothing wrong. He said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he said, Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. So Jesus has already said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do. Jesus has already comforted the women on their way to the cross. Jesus here reconciles the thief, the so-called good thief, and says, Today you will be with me in paradise. Okay? It was the next pericope. It was now about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the whole land till the 9th hour, while the sun's light failed, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Remember in reading Mark how there were 3 things at the beginning of the gospel story that are revisited at the end. At the baptism, the sky was torn open, the Spirit poured down, and the Father says, You are my Son. Luke gets to that point here, but he separates the passages a little bit, probably not seeing what Mark has done. So verse 45, the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Verse 46, then Jesus, crying with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And after he said this, he breathed his last. Notice the blanks in the other gospel columns. What were Jesus' last words in Mark?
Why have you forsaken me?
My God, why have you abandoned me? You should know that. Okay? And then the same last words in, remember, Matthew almost always follows Mark. So Matthew also has Jesus' last words, my God, why have you abandoned me? And we talked about what that could mean last time. But notice, again, Jesus is in control of himself. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit, which is a reference to a psalm. It's a selection from a psalm. I can't think of which one, 31, 32? But it's not Psalm 22. It doesn't show Jesus unhinged as he appears in Mark. The bottom of that column, when the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God and said, certainly this man was innocent. So after Pilate 3 times and Herod once, now the centurion adds on that this man was innocent. Remember in Mark's gospel, what does the centurion say? Surely this was the Son of God. So again, a different kind of tradition, a different kind of approach. All the multitudes who assembled to see the sight, when they saw what had taken place, returned home beating their breasts. So in Luke's gospel, it's hard to imagine that the whole community is against Jesus.
Your car window's open and it's raining.
Oh, here. Thank you. Good grab. I opened the window so I have a chocolate bar in there. I didn't want it to melt. That's the real reason why I did that. Can't win out. Anyway, the crowd in Luke's gospel is sedate, quiet. It's the leaders, the Pharisees, the priests, they're opposed to Jesus. But the crowd is not. They leave. The soldiers declare him innocent. The crowds repent. The women acquaintances keep watch. Go back to verse 35. It was the priests scoff, the soldiers mock, people watch. Okay? So look at 350, Brooklyn 350. Turn the page. Verse 55. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed. So again, back in chapter 8, remember? The women, and here they appear again. Okay? They have been faithful. They have stuck with Jesus. And they saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. On the Sabbath they rested according to the commandment. Okay? That's Jesus' death. So, chapter 20, remember Mark ended rather abruptly. Luke is far from being so abrupt. It starts with the discovery of the empty tomb. Remember, in Mark's gospel, the women come and they see a young man at the tomb. In verse 4, the women come and they see 2 men sitting by or standing, stood by them. Okay? Turn the page, verse 8. Actually, verse 6. Why do you seek the living among the dead, these 2 guys say. Remember how he told you, while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, on the 3rd day rise. And they remembered his words. So the men bring back to mind, the angels, or whoever you want to think they are, bring back to the women's mind. Again, and the women were part of the company, Jesus' predictions about his death and rising. And verse 9, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. Now, we have talked about the role of women in the Old Testament, a little bit in the New Testament. Women were not allowed in a Jewish trial to give testimony. Why not? Because they were figured they couldn't be stable. The word hysteria, okay, hysteria, you know what that comes from? The word for womb, as in a hysterectomy, okay? And that's the basic cultural prejudice. Women could not be people who gave good testimony. They couldn't be relied on to give good testimony. That's the backstory to when Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, come, and other women come, they are not believed. Now, interesting point. Why would you put this in the story? If you knew your culture did not accept women testimony, why would all the Gospels say the first witnesses were women? Why would they do that? Because that's how it happened. Now, that might seem to be a very small result of that, but sometimes you'll hear people say, well, you know, they made that up. They made that. The disciples the evangelists have an opportunity to clean up the story, that it was Peter or John or the boys who went. No, it's consistently the women who were the first there, even though no one in that culture would have been primed to accept their testimony. Okay, so this is a way of arguing that, you know, the historicity of this, nobody would make it up this way. Nobody would make it up this way. You would never have women be the key eyewitnesses initially. Okay? But so the women are charged by the men to tell the others, to evangelize, and they complete their mission. The women are faithful. They do to what they were told. All right? Then comes the story, in Book 355, comes the story of the Emmaus. Okay, so it's still Sunday. That very day, two of them were going to a village named Emmaus. We find out later that one of them is Cleopas. We don't know who the other is. It could be Mrs. Cleopas. That's a possibility. Okay? But Luke doesn't tell us that. You know the story very well. You probably even know this next piece, that the pattern, the shape of this encounter is reflected in the shape of what we do on Sunday. The disciples have thrown in the towel. They're sad. They're leaving town when this stranger walks up alongside and asks them about their upset. Why are you upset? We're upset about Jesus of Nazareth. We had been hoping he was the one who would set Israel free. And now the third day since this has happened, some women, verse 22, some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body, but came back saying that they had seen a vision of angels. Then they said he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it to be just as the women had said, but him they did not see. Okay. At this point, Jesus, who has been the one who joins them, says, "O foolish men," slow of foolish, masculine ending it was, slow of heart to believe all that the prophets had spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures things concerning himself. So I started out by saying there's a pattern here. The disciples of Jesus have lost hope. They're sad. They think everything has collapsed. But Jesus comes up alongside them, and in their sadness begins to talk to them about the scriptures. I think I may have said this last time to you, We tend to think of early Christians reading the Old Testament and seeing all about Jesus. I have heard Christians say, how could the Jews have been so stupid? Not, with all the prophesying done in the Old Testament, how could they not have expected Jesus? Well, you read the Old Testament. It isn't so clear, is it? Not at all. Here in the Emmaus story, it's only in hindsight that Jesus can explain this to them. They didn't see it in foresight, but now that he's dead, he's telling them about all of these things, that it was necessary. They come to the town where they want to go. Stay with us. It is evening. The day is now spent. So he stayed with them, and at table he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them, and their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. So what you have there is the same pattern. On Sunday, we gather of people who've had the stuffings kicked out of us sometimes during the week. We come together for worship, and the scriptures are read. And somebody tries to explain that these old words are really about us and now. And then we take bread and we tell the story of Jesus and we bless it and break it and share it. And then he is among us. So it's the pattern of what we do on Sunday that you find in this story, except that he disappears. The two of them get up and they race back to verse 33. They rose that same hour and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 gathered together, who said, "The Lord has risen indeed, has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. Interesting, Luke does not give us the detailed story of Jesus' appearance to Peter. He focuses on the appearance to the women, to Cleopas and Cleopas' friend. When they arrive back to the upper room, they're told Jesus has appeared to Simon. And no sooner do they say that, than they tell their story, then Jesus himself comes in the room. All right? Peace be with you, verse 21, he says. All right? As the Father has sent me, so I send you. I'm reading John's Gospel. Sorry, wrong paragraph. 36. Jesus himself stood among them and said, "Peace to you." But they were startled and frightened and supposed that they saw a spirit. He said to them, "Why are you troubled? Why do you questionings arise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Handle me and see. A spirit does not have flesh and bones." And then he says, "Give me something to eat." Again, ghosts can't eat either, even though Casper does eat popcorn on the Netflix. Is that Netflix? Yeah. Okay, but real ghosts cannot eat. That's the essence of this here. Jesus asks, whatever the resurrected life is, I mean, he walks through walls, that's not normal, but he can eat. Okay? And 365. These are my words which I spoke to you when I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. Notice how Jesus talks about the Old Testament. The prophets, Moses, which is what's Moses, law of Moses, what's that? What part of the Bible? Not the Old Testament. What part of the Bible? The law of Moses.
Exodus.
Not just. Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Numbers, the Pentateuch, the Torah. Okay? The prophets, which in Jewish reckoning includes the history books, and then the Psalms. That one book stands for the writings, that third looser connection. The Torah, the histories, the writings. Okay? Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures. And he says, "You are witnesses of these things," verse 48. "Behold, I send the promise of my Father upon you, but stay in the city until you are clothed with the power from on high." So again, how did the gospel begin? Zechariah in the temple. visited by an angel. Jesus, remember, in Mark, Jesus says, I'll see you in Galilee, right? Here it's not. Stay here. Stay in Jerusalem. Then he led them out as far as Bethany, and lifted up his hands, he blessed them. While he blessed them, he parted from them, and was carried up into heaven. And they worshipped him, and returned to Jerusalem with great joy, and continually in the temple they blessed God. Amen. Well, not amen, but that's the end of the story. So the gospel ends with both references to joy and the temple. Luke's work is distinctive in being followed by the Acts of the Apostles. Although perhaps a historian in the ancient sense, like Mark, Luke is really a theologian. He writes to present Jesus as the bringer of salvation to all, not just Jews, as God's plan. He writes to counter concern that God is inconsistent, moody, or fickle. Nor is there hardly any mention of the idea of the cross for us. There's that daily cross, that's the only reference to it. Okay? It's not nearly the same kind of gospel as Mark is. Within that major purpose, Jesus shows concern for the poor, for outcasts, for women, the Spirit, prayer. Jesus is a type of Elijah and Elisha. Luke, the author, is the father of all presentations of Jesus in which he is an example to be imitated. The WWJD world. Okay? That whole idea that we are called to imitate Jesus comes from Luke. We will see in the Acts how the human actors themselves will begin imitating Jesus. The poet Dante calls Luke the scribe of the gentleness of Christ. Any comments or questions? Yes, Bertie.
In Luke's gospel, it's not mentioned the coming of the Holy Spirit to the apostles.
Because Luke has the Acts of the Apostles coming, and that's what he'll kind of put that emphasis. Yes, Peter.
You know, I often thought why the circle that Jesus appeared to after he rose from the dead was so small. You know, I mean, that was God's choice. But it would seem like the word could have gotten out a lot easier if he would have somehow appeared to those who sentenced him, you know, to the leaders, to Pilate and to Herod. Why that small group?
You know, Jesus, think of in Mark's gospel, remember at the end of that first day when they say, everybody's talking about you, let's go back. He says, no, that's not why I've come. I've come to preach the gospel. That somehow it is God's plan not to do a top-down, the story of Christianity, frankly, with Constantine, and then Clovis. Is it Clovis? Was he the king of the Franks? He became Christian, and all the Franks became Christians. To some degree, we're still trying to catch up. The early church was kind of like the Marines. They were few and the bold and the brave. Then Christendom came. Christianity by leader imposing it, and you got a lot of people who say, "Yay, Jesus," but they don't really get Jesus. We're still dealing with that. So maybe Jesus, maybe the Father knows what he's doing in saying maybe the best way is not to just convince a man on the top who can order people to be baptized, but to try to make individual renewals of people one by conversions, maybe. That's my attempt to try to justify what God has done.
No real answer. It's just
Other questions? Stephen?
Many of the Gospels give indications of other appearances of Jesus after he rose. And I guess my point is, are there apocryphal?
Oh my God, yes.
Okay.
Lots of them. Lots of crazy ones too. We're done here. You can take it. You can fold up your mat, pick up your mat and go home. Yes, you.